This is going to be a check-in. I'm checking in with you guys in terms of board gaming. Kind of a curiosity, because the great thing about board games, besides the narrative and playing and strategizing, is connecting with the community. I love your recommendations. I appreciate massively your recommendations. My wallet does not appreciate it, but so far in sharing some of the games that I enjoy and some of the strategies that I enjoy, that feedback has really opened up a number of games that honestly, I would not have considered. So I have to push out that massive thank you in the comments and some of the feedback over on my blog. This is now going to lead to the question, the board gaming question of the day. Your collection, maybe it's massive, maybe it's a little bit more condensed on there. Your gaming collection, what is your most played game? What is your most played game? I'm going to narrow it down to one. And you guys know with these like top 5, top 3, or I start top 1 and it expands out to 3, your number one type of game on there. Now, just because we're coming from different places and the board gaming hobby is such, we're going to include plays and perspectives as both a gaming group and as solo on there. So if you're like me, where probably 60% of your board gaming is solo and 40% is with a group on there, or it might be the opposite. You might be like 90%, 100% with a group, or 100% solo. Just to be fair across the spectrum, we're going to put it all together. Zombicide Black Plague has gotten a lot of plays on there. It has. A lot of things work for me. I really enjoy the game. I pushed this up to my archive here on YouTube under the board game playlist. I follow battle reports on my blog, but that's not the number one game. Invader, I'm sinking in a lot of time in Invader right now, and Invader might be retiring Black Plague. I've certainly sunk a lot of hours into Kingdom Death Monster, fantastic experience. I've sunk a lot of hours into Gloomhaven. I actually do keep track of this stuff on there, most of the time just written down on like bills and envelopes and things, and then eventually when the stack of paper gets so big, I transfer it over to my Excel sheet and crunch the numbers on there. But it's probably about 95% accurate of the plays over the years, whether with a group or solo. In terms of Gloomhaven versus Kingdom Death Monster, I have to check. I want to say that Gloomhaven has more play hours, because Gloomhaven is something I sit and play, where Kingdom Death Monster, by its very nature, either playing solo or with a group, will play it for 2 or 3 months, and then it goes back on the gaming shelf, and the miniatures taunt me. And they sit there, and it's like, hey, we haven't done Gloomy for a while. Excuse me, we haven't done Kingdom Death for a while. We bring it back down. So the plays are a little bit more interrupted. But they don't have my number one. The real surprise sleeper game in terms of plays for me, Dark Souls. I was, and I still am, a major Dark Souls, the board game fanatic. I mean, that's a podcast for another time. I like it for what it is. We'll just leave it at that. I banked in a lot of hours, but then getting burnt out based on basically how Steamforge has handled the whole thing, waiting for the expansions, waiting for additional content. I've made my way through the mega bosses. They are mega. They're amazing. But I'm waiting for that next wave to drop. I'm kind of in limbo on there. So looking at those hours in my spreadsheet, I'm really surprised at what I've clocked in with Dark Souls. That's because initially it was so front-loaded. It was crazy. Then we have games that Talisman. You guys know I love Talisman. I have put in so many hours in Talisman, and by default, that's where I was going to lead with this podcast, this idea. And I said, let me check the hours. Certainly there's a lot in Talisman. You could say, though, those hours are somewhat inflated. If you've played the game, you know, and this isn't a criticism, I love it, it drags out after a while. It really does, especially if you're going to play it to the bitter end. So the game is much longer than it needs to be, than it wants to be. So those hours, while they're massive, they are a little bit inflated based on bad game design. Then we've got a couple of games like Relic. I hope Relic gets a reprint on there. And Relic was a sleeper, picked up a lot of hours because with the 40K group, we would play 40K and then sit down and play Relic on there. So just by the crossover, I was picking up a lot of play hours on Relic. But the number one game, Runebound 2nd edition. Now I'm playing 3rd edition. I love 3rd edition. The debate of 2nd edition versus 3rd edition, there's a lot of pros and cons for both. And certain elements in 3rd edition are better. That's not a criticism of 2nd. That's what you expect. When a board game evolves out to a new edition, you expect certain things that, by learning from the previous edition, kind of get incorporated. But I still play Runebound 2nd edition a lot. And looking over my life since 2008, that's when I acquired the title. And I don't even have all the expansions for it. That's what's crazy, because in 2008, I was just getting into board gaming, and I picked up Runebound. I played it. I wasn't aware, really, that things go out of print, or you want to acquire certain titles because they're going to be a limited run. I was also playing other war games and continue to play other war games on there. Board gaming was more of a side story on there, where over the years now, a decade plus later, board gaming has occupied so much more, not only in our culture, but in my own play group and my own play time on there. Just not enough hours to do everything, but I try. I really do with this amazing hobby. I basically need to clone myself. One for Battletech, one for Warhammer 40K, one for board gaming, and then the real life me, I don't know, I guess play D&D and stuff like that. But Runebound 2nd edition, I've logged the most hours. Not so much since 2008, the longevity, because there's other games there too. Descent 1st edition logged a lot of hours. But again, a little bit inflated simply because the mechanics of that game lead to long plays. Runebound 2nd edition, because it captured my imagination of being a really good level up, fight, fantasy, exploration game. It's got some unique mechanics with the movement dice. It's got some awesome shop items in terms of magic items to purchase and followers. The combat scales up really, really, really fast on there. It does play well with a group, but it tends to drag out and be a little bit long, but it works equally well on there. That's been my go-to game. That's been my solo game on there. And there was a time in my life around 2010, 11-ish, where things were really crazy at work, working on certain projects and life. And I had just moved and started a new venture in my life. And just to decompress, I only had maybe an hour and a half, at night, like 1:30 in the morning. And I wanted to get some gaming in there and have that connection. Runebound literally saw me through that journey for like a year and a half, 2 years. You guys know how that is, right? You start a new initiative, something at work, something at school. You're like, okay, it's only going to be 6 months. It's crazy, but I can do 6 months, no problem. And then next thing you know, it's like a year and a half later. And then next thing you know, you're looking at like 2 years later. But Runebound was simply in that silence, sitting there, playing it 30, 40 minutes at night, in the middle of the night, just connecting, playing it, enjoying it, playing it with groups, exploring different things. Out of all the games that I own, and the spreadsheet with the tracking the hours is a little bit scary on there, looking how much time I've pumped into board gaming. All time absolutely well spent in terms of creative thinking and in terms of memories and in creating fellowship and friendship and community with my friends. I wouldn't change it. If anything, I'd double down and do more if I could, and I try to do that. But Runebound wins. It's seen me through that. And even enjoying 3rd edition, which I do and I have and I love, 2nd edition still gets a lot of plays on there. So now I'm going to turn it over to you guys. And I said, look, only one game. And, of course, we narrated a lot of games that have been taking up my time over the years in this board gaming journey. As I flip through my Excel sheet here, some of those numbers are scary. In your collection, big or small, 50 games, 30 games, 5 games, whatever you have. What is that number one game that you've been playing, that you've been logging, and over the vector of your board gaming career? And again, whether that's like 10 years, 5 years, 1 year, what one single game is getting the most plays. And why? Because then I'm going to go check it out, because it might be worth adding to my collection. I won't say it's going to unseat Runebound, but you never know.